It was quite early in the morning, and the Black Pig lay at anchor in the shelter of a little rocky bay by an island far away in the blue Pacific Ocean. On any other day, Captain Pugwash and his pirates would still have been fast asleep. But this morning was different. The captain had decided to smarten up his ship and his crew. Everybody had been called early, and even Captain Pugwash was up and dressed and sitting in his cabin, sipping the early morning tea which Tom the cabin boy had brought him. He was also putting the finishing touches to a large notice which he had written out. In fact, he had just signed his name at the bottom when there was a knock on his door, and the mate came in, looking rather uncomfortable.
"We're begging pardon, Captain," said he, "but the crew has a complaint. The ship's biscuits is unfit for human consumption. They're full of weevils."
"Walloping whales, what on earth is a weevil?"
asked the captain.
"They're like small beetles, Captain," said Tom. "They eat biscuits."
"In that case,"
said Pugwash crossly,
"the crew had better eat them quickly, or there won't be any biscuits left."
"Sorry, Captain, the men won't touch 'em,"
said the mate.
"They reckon it's cruelty to weevils."
At this stage, the captain became very angry.
"Doddering dolphins, master mate,"
He cried.
"Pirates should be desperadoes, not do-gooders. Take this notice and nail it to the mainmast immediately. Things are going to be very different aboard this ship from now on."
So the mate took the notice and nailed it to the mast. But when Barnabas and Willie read it, they were filled with horror and dismay.
"All decks will be double scrubbed before breakfast."
"All pirates will do physical training exercises after breakfast."
And when he read it, so was the mate.
"And breakfast will consist of ship's biscuits."
"With weevils."
"That settles it."
For a time, they muttered angrily together. Then,
"We're all agreed, are we?"
"Aye, aye." "Right, to the captain's cabin, by the left, quick, march."
straight into the middle of the captain's breakfast, marched the three pirates.
Left, right, hold."
"Muttering midships,"
cried Pugwash.
"what is the meaning of this?"
"This
Replied the mate.
is a mutiny.
But
We are taking over the ship." "Aye,
Chortled Willie.
we're all captains now."
"And you are going to be marooned on the island."
Growled Barnabas.
"Exactly."
Said the mate.
"Tom, lad, pack up the captain's kit and load it on the dinghy. He's leaving."
Poor Captain Pugwash. He muttered and spluttered a lot. But in the end, he saw that his crew's mind was made up. And so, complaining bitterly, he let Tom pack up his possessions and got into the dinghy. The crew handed down his sea chest and supplies of fresh water and food, and pistols and cutlasses and all the things a castaway would need.
"That's the lot, then,"
Said the mate when everything was stowed aboard.
"Bye, Captain."
But Tom said,
"Hang on, Captain. Make room for me."
"For who?"
asked Barnabas in a shocked voice.
"For me, of course,"
Said Tom.
"After all, I am his cabin boy. Bye, all."
And in spite of horrified protests from the pirates, he climbed down into the dinghy and started to row towards the island.
"Well, who would have thought it?"
Said Pirate Willie, as they watched the little boat moving further and further away from the Black Pig. They weren't too worried about doing without their captain, but losing Tom was a disaster. Then the mate pulled himself together.
"It's no good crying over lost cabin boys. Hoist the mainsail, Captain Barnabas. And you, Captain Willie, you get the anchor up, and I'll make us all a nice cup of tea."
But Barnabas wasn't very clever with sails.
"This one, Captain, mate."
No, not that one."
He untied the wrong ropes, and a moment later, down came the whole of the mainsail.
"Oh!"
And the two pirates found themselves covered in a mass of heaving canvas. Willie didn't fare much better with the anchor. While trying to work out how best to pull it up, he leant too far over and lost his balance
Yo!
and landed with a heavy splash in the warm, wet water.
Never mind.
Thought Willie as he climbed up the anchor chain.
At least there'll be a nice cup of tea soon.
But when he did get back on deck, and when the other two pirates had unwrapped themselves, the mate shook his head sadly.
No tea,
Said he.
I've just remembered. Tom took the kettle with him.
For the pirates, it was the start of a very bad day. They couldn't sail the ship without Tom to tell them what to do. They didn't know how to cook, because Tom had always done that too. So they were reduced to eating the despised ship's biscuits, weevils and all. And that evening, they climbed miserably into their unmade bunks, without even their bedtime cocoa to lull them to sleep. But much, much worse was to follow. For that evening, unknown to anyone, another pirate ship had arrived at the island and dropped anchor out of sight around the point in another little bay. It was Cutthroat Jake's ship, and Cutthroat Jake was the most terrible pirate afloat, and by far Captain Pugwash's worst and most frightening enemy. Even now, Jake and his hideous crew, with muffled oars, were setting off in their longboat to attack the Black Pig. The moon was just rising, and Jake rubbed his great hairy hands and growled,
Dunno why we bothers to muffle them oars. That old rapscallion Pugwash and his useless crew will be snoring their fat heads off by now. And have they got an ugly shock coming?
But Jake was wrong about the captain. Far away, out of sight on the island, he and Tom were very snug. While Pugwash had spent the day pottering about on the island, looking for buried treasure here, there, and everywhere, Tom had built a small hut out of bamboo and palm leaves. Earlier that evening, he had cooked a delicious dinner, and now Captain Pugwash was savouring a fine old French brandy before going to bed.
This is much better than being on board that stuffy old ship.
In fact, he was just turning in for the night as Jake's longboat slid silently under the bows of the Black Pig, and he and his men scrambled stealthily up the anchor chain to the deck.
You take the crew, me beauties,
Whispered Jake with an evil grin.
I'll handle me old friend the captain.
It was indeed an ugly surprise for the mate, Barnabas, and Willie when they woke. Each opened his eyes to find a gleaming dagger at his throat, and within minutes all three were trussed up like turkeys. But of course, when Jake reached the captain's cabin, there was no captain to be seen.
So,
Breathed Jake.
hiding is he, the cowardly old blackguard? And it could be dangerous trying to seek him out in the dark. We'll lie up till morning, and then, we'll sniff him out.
So Jake and his men kept watch over their captives and settled down to drink rum and play cards and sing very rude sea shanties until dawn. They had all quite forgotten that the captain had a cabin boy called Tom. On the island, Tom was woken early by the singing.
Not like our lot to sing at this time of day,
He thought.
I wonder what's up.
He set out for a high rock on the point to find out, and he saw quite a lot. In the little bay on his left hand was Jake's ship.
Help! I'd know the Flying Dustman anywhere.
Then, in the right-hand bay, he saw Jake's longboat, tied up alongside the Black Pig.
That's bad, he said to himself. Jake must have captured the ship. And what are we going to do about that?
So Tom thought and thought, and then, at last, he had what seemed to be a good idea. He went back to the dinghy and unpacked a quantity of bacon and eggs from the stores. Then he lit a fire, back at the campsite and began to fry. Luckily, his plan worked. The breeze carried the delicious smell of cooking out towards the black pig, just as Jake and his men came out on deck to begin their search for the captain.
So that's where he's skulking!
Roared Jake.
Man the longboat, me handsomes! Now we'll take that old booby Pugwash and his breakfast!
And greedily he and his men tumbled into their boat and set off for the island. Meanwhile, Captain Pugwash was awoken by the sound of sizzling and the tempting smell.
Bacon and eggs. Oh, yum, yum.
But Tom said,
Sorry, Captain. The bacon's not for now. Quick, help me with the dinghy.
and a moment later he and the captain were carrying the little boat to the other side of the point.
But,
Shh, Captain. Keep your head down.
Poor Captain Pugwash. It was bad enough to have lost his ship, but now with his breakfast gone as well, he began to feel quite sorry for himself. And of course, he had no idea what was really happening. For just as Cutthroat Jake was beaching his longboat on one side of the point,
Follow the smell, me hearties!
Tom, hidden from Jake on the other side, was setting out with the captain in the dinghy, and making, to Pugwash's surprise, not for the Black Pig, but for Jake's ship, the Flying Dustman.
Now, Captain,
Said Tom when they reached it.
hold tight to the anchor chain. I'm going to saw it through and cast the Flying Dustman adrift.
And very soon Tom had hacked through one of the rusty links. The chain fell away into the water, and if Tom hadn't grabbed him, the captain would have fallen in too. Then Tom started to row for all he was worth back towards the Black Pig. In the meantime, on the island, Jake and his pirates had followed their noses to the campsite and were quarrelling greedily over the bacon and eggs.
I want that.
Hey!
In fact, they'd forgotten all about the man they were looking for. Until suddenly Jake looked round and saw, to his amazement, horror and fury, Tom and the captain climbing on board the Black Pig and his own Flying Dustman drifting away quite fast on the outgoing tide.
After 'em!
Roared Jake, and he and his men rushed back to their longboat. But by the time they were afloat, Tom had untied the mate and Willie and Barnabas, and the Black Pig was underway.
Heave, master mate!
A fresh breeze sprang up, and although Jake's pirates rowed like demons,
Faster! Faster!
the Black Pig drew far ahead of them as the sails filled and she made for the open sea. In fact, the ship's wake caught Jake's longboat and pitched them all into the water. They cursed and swore horribly, but with their own ship drifting far away on the horizon, there was nothing at all they could do about it, except swim miserably back to the island.
And now,
Said Tom, when he felt it was safe to hand over the steering wheel to the captain.
it really is breakfast time. Bacon and eggs all round.
Hurrah!
Cried the mate.
And no ship's biscuits.
Shouted Barnabas.
No weevils neither.
Added Willie.
Poor little things.
So, for the second time that morning, Tom cooked breakfast. And very good it was, too.
Well done, Tom lad.
The bacon's done to a turn. Clever lad, our Tom.
Said the mate.
Aye. Worth his weight in gold.
Said Willie, munching happily.
Almost worth having the cabin back to have Tom around.
Remarked Barnabas. But Pugwash didn't hear them.
Fluttering flounders.
He cried, the steering wheel in one hand and a forkful of bacon in the other.
You fellows didn't get very far without your famous captain, eh? Fussing about a few mouldy biscuits, indeed. They soon needed me back when there was real trouble afoot. Eh, Tom, lad?
But Tom was busy starting the washing up, and he just smiled and said nothing.